Girl sees millionaire tied up and his blind son about to be attacked. Then she does this. Comment saying what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better. So subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching Georgia afternoon sun punished the uneven stones of the central square in Oak Creek as desperate screams echoed through the residential neighborhood. 4-year-old Lily Miller dropped the piece of stale bread she had found in the trash and ran toward the terrifying sounds coming from the large corner house. Her dirty, bare feet barely touched the ground as she scrambled over the low wall that separated the street from the Hayes property. The scene unfolding before her eyes was one of pure terror. Ethan Hayes, a 52-year-old man known throughout Oak Creek as the owner of the largest chain of hardware stores in the region, was tied with thick ropes in his own garden. His business clothes were torn, his face swollen from recent blows, and he struggled desperately to free himself from the bonds that held him to a century-old oak tree. But what made Lily's heart race with fear wasn't just seeing the city's important man in that degrading situation. It was the sight of Caleb, Ethan's 8-year-old son, walking slowly across the yard toward the kennel, where 3 Rottweilers were growling and barking in a crazed fury. The boy, blind since birth, was following only the sound of the barks, not understanding the mortal danger that awaited him. The dogs had managed to break the fence that kept them penned and were now circling freely in the yard, their fur on end and foam dripping from their mouths. Lily could see old scars on the animals' paws, signs that they had attacked before, and she knew instinctively that Caleb wouldn't stand a chance if he got any closer. She shouted for Caleb to stop with all the force her small lungs could muster, but her childish voice was lost in the deafening noise of the furious barking. Without a second thought, the girl began to gather stones from the ground and throw them at the animals, yelling and making as much noise as possible to divert their attention from the boy. One of the stones hit the largest of the dogs right on the forehead, causing it to retreat and snarl in her direction. The other 2 followed, now running toward the intruder who dared to challenge them. Caleb stopped immediately upon hearing the commotion, his sharp ears picking up the new sounds coming from a different direction. Lily continued to throw stones, climbing onto a pile of bricks to stay out of the animals' reach, but remaining in the yard so they wouldn't turn their attention back to the helpless boy. She screamed for someone to help, that there was a child in danger, her high-pitched voice cutting through the afternoon air like a siren. It was then that the windows of the neighboring houses began to open. Mrs. Gable, the elderly neighbor who lived next door, was the first to appear, followed by other residents who had heard the tumult. Within minutes, the local police and firefighters were on the scene, freeing Ethan and controlling the enraged dogs. As Ethan was being treated by paramedics, he couldn't take his eyes off the dirty, ragged little girl who had saved his son. Lily remained at a distance, leaning against the wall, watching everything with her immense, frightened brown eyes. Her clothes were little more than rags, her hair was matted and dirty, and the marks of malnutrition were visible on her small, thin face. Ethan asked the officer taking his statement who that girl was. The officer, Sergeant Davis, a robust 40-year-old man who knew every homeless person in the small town, explained that she was Lily, that she was always around asking for money, and that she lived on the streets. He mentioned that they had tried to take her to the municipal shelter several times, but she always ran away. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. This tiny child living on the streets had risked her own life to save Caleb. While he was tied up and desperate, unable to protect his own son, it was a 4-year-old girl, without a home or family, who had the courage and determination to face 3 ferocious dogs. He murmured that she had saved his son, his voice thick with emotion. Caleb, who had been taken inside by the housekeeper as soon as the situation was under control, was now on the porch, trying to understand everything that had happened. His slender fingers groped the porch railing as he tried to identify the voices and sounds around him. He asked his father where the girl who helped him was, his soft voice filled with genuine curiosity, wanting to know if she was the one who had shouted to warn him of the danger. Ethan looked at his son and then at Lily, who continued to watch from a distance, ready to flee at the slightest sign that someone would try to force her to leave. There was something in her eyes that touched him deeply, a mixture of courage and vulnerability, of strength and helplessness that reminded him of his own difficult childhood. Ethan replied yes, his son, she had saved him, and they would never forget it, making a decision that would change all their lives. As the police finished collecting evidence and the neighbors gradually returned to their homes, Ethan slowly approached Lily. The girl took a few steps back, but didn't run away completely, as if something in her instinct told her that this man was different from the other adults who usually shooed her away or tried to force her to do things she didn't want to. He said her name was Lily, wasn't it, crouching down to be at her level. He introduced himself as Ethan and told her she had saved his son today. The girl nodded shyly, saying nothing, but her large eyes remained fixed on his face, assessing his intentions. He said she must be hungry and asked if she wanted to come have a snack at his house, certain that Caleb would like to thank her personally. Lily hesitated for a long moment. She was used to distrusting adults, especially well-dressed ones like this man, but there was something in his voice, a genuine kindness she rarely encountered in the cruel world where she lived. Finally, she took a small step toward the house, and Ethan felt as if he were witnessing the beginning of something he couldn't yet fully comprehend, but which he knew would change their lives forever. The interior of the Hayes' house contrasted drastically with the harsh world Lily knew. Polished marble floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, while solid wood furniture occupied spacious rooms decorated with expensive paintings and Persian rugs. The girl walked cautiously behind Ethan, her bare feet leaving small smudges of dirt on the impeccable floor. Victoria Hayes, Ethan's wife, appeared at the top of the mahogany staircase with a poorly disguised expression of shock and disapproval. At 48, she maintained an impeccable appearance, with blonde hair always styled at the most expensive salon in town and clothes that cost more than many families in Oak Creek earned in a month. She asked Ethan what this meant, descending the stairs with calculated steps, her eyes fixed on the dirty child accompanying her husband. The housekeeper had told her what happened, but she questioned why he brought this girl into their home. Ethan firmly replied that this was Lily, and she had saved their son's life. He placed a protective hand on the girl's shoulder, explaining that if it weren't for her, Caleb could have been attacked by the dogs. Lily instinctively recoiled at the elegant woman's cold tone, but Caleb, who had come down the stairs feeling for the banister, interrupted the growing tension. He softly called out for Lily, his head turning in the direction of the voice he had heard in the yard, asking if she was really there. The girl looked at the blind. A boy, noticing for the first time how his blue eyes seemed focused on something only he could see. There was a delicacy in his movements, a careful way of moving that showed how he had learned to navigate a visual world through his other senses. She replied quietly that she was, her first word since entering the house. Caleb thanked her for helping him, smiling in her direction. He had heard her yelling and throwing stones, and he thought it was very brave. Victoria watched the interaction with growing discomfort. It wasn't that she wasn't grateful for what the girl had done for Caleb, but her presence there, dirty and clearly malnourished, disturbed the perfect order of her carefully constructed life. She said with a forced politeness that of course they were grateful, but perhaps they should take her back to where she lived, sure that her family must be worried. Ethan patiently explained that she had no family, that she lived on the street, alone. The words fell like stones in the silence of the luxurious room. Caleb, who had moved closer, stopped abruptly upon hearing the revelation. He asked in disbelief what she meant by alone. Lily stated, simply that she slept in the abandoned church on St. Joseph Street, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, adding that it was warm inside when it rained. Victoria felt a knot in her stomach. As much as she tried to maintain an emotional distance, the raw reality of the girl's situation was impossible to ignore. Caleb, for his part, seemed genuinely shocked. He asked if she slept in a church, all alone, and wasn't she afraid? Lily admitted she was sometimes, but that Jesus looked after her. Sister Benedicta had taught her that he protects children. Ethan wanted to know who Sister Benedicta was. Lily explained she was a nun who sometimes gave her food before she moved to another city, and that she had also taught her some letters. This revelation surprised everyone present. A street child who could read, even partially, was a rare thing in Oak Creek. Victoria called for Maria, the housekeeper, and instructed her to prepare a warm bath for the girl and to see if some of Caleb's old clothes might fit her. Maria Aparecida, a kind 55-year-old woman who had worked in the house for over a decade, appeared immediately. She had witnessed the entire incident in the yard and had been deeply touched by little Lily's courage. She said, "Of course, Mrs. Victoria," and extended a hand to Lily, telling her to come with her, that they would get her cleaned up and then have something delicious to eat. While Maria took Lily upstairs, Ethan and Victoria were left alone in the room with Caleb, who remained thoughtful. After a few minutes of silence, the boy asked his father if she could stay for dinner, that he wanted to talk more with her. Victoria was about to protest when Ethan interrupted her with a determined look. He said of course she could, son, and that in fact he thought she should stay for a few days, at least until they could find a better solution for her situation. Victoria exclaimed, questioning if he was serious, that they knew nothing about this child, where she came from, or what kind of diseases she might have. He firmly retorted that he knew she saved their son, and that he knew she was just a 4-year-old child who needed help. If it had been Caleb in her situation, he would want someone to do the same for him. The comparison hit Victoria like a slap. She looked at Caleb, who was listening to everything in silence, and imagined her own small, vulnerable son alone on the streets. The image made her shudder. Half an hour later, when Lily came down the stairs wearing clean clothes and with her hair washed and combed, the transformation was remarkable. Without the dirt that covered her, it was clear she was a beautiful girl, with delicate features and expressive eyes that shone with surprising intelligence. Caleb, noticing the change in the sound of her footsteps, said wow, asking if she was wearing shoes now. Lily replied that Maria gave her these little shoes, looking down at the small sneakers that were a bit big for her feet and that they made noise when she walked. Caleb smiled and said he liked the sound. That way he knew when she was coming close. During dinner, an unusual scene unfolded. Caleb, usually shy and reserved during meals, livened up with Lily's presence. He began to explain to her how he identified the different dishes by smell and texture, while she listened, fascinated. She asked, impressed, if he could really know what food it was just by the smell. He said he could, identifying the rosemary roast chicken, the saffron rice, and Maria's special stuffing with bacon and raisins. Lily tasted each dish carefully, savoring flavors she hadn't experienced in a long time. Victoria watched the two interact, noticing how her son seemed more confident and communicative than he had been in months. During dessert, Ethan asked Lily what had happened to her parents. The question made the girl's face close up slightly. She said she didn't really know, that her Aunt Sarah said they went far away when she was little and couldn't take her with them. When asked who Aunt Sarah was, Lily explained that she sometimes took care of her, but now worked at the hospital and only saw her when she could. It was Sarah who told her to stay in the church when she had nowhere else to sleep. Victoria and Ethan exchanged glances. The girl's story was beginning to unfold, and every detail revealed a life of abandonment and struggle that touched their hearts deeply. Caleb suddenly asked if Lily could sleep in the guest room tonight so she wouldn't have to go back to the church alone. The request caught Victoria off guard. It was the first time Caleb had shown genuine interest in someone outside the immediate family, and the change was so evident that she couldn't refuse. She said slowly that she could for tonight, and that tomorrow they would talk about what to do from there. Later, when Lily was asleep in the guest room and Caleb had been put to bed, Victoria and Ethan talked late into the night about the unexpected situation they found themselves in. Ethan said she couldn't just go back to the streets, not after what she did for Caleb. Victoria agreed they needed to help her, but questioned bringing her to live there permanently, arguing that they knew nothing about caring for a traumatized child. Ethan asked what she suggested, that they hand her back to the municipal shelter, knowing she would just run away again. Victoria had no answer for that. But as they debated Lily's future, neither of them imagined that on the floor above, the girl was awake, listening to every word through the thin walls, and that her next actions would change everything in a way they could never have predicted. The early morning brought a discovery that would change everything. Ethan woke up to strange noises coming from the office, and upon going downstairs to investigate, found Lily sitting on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and with an expression of intense concentration on her small face. She was holding a pen and seemed to be trying to write something. He asked gently what she was doing there, trying not to startle her. The girl looked up, and he could see dried tears on her cheeks. She apologized, explaining that she wanted to write a letter to her Aunt Sarah to tell her she was okay, but she didn't know how to make all the letters right. Ethan knelt beside her, picking up the paper where she had scrawled a few words. To his surprise, he could identify Aunt Sarah and Lily, written in a childish but clearly legible hand. He asked who had taught her to write those words. She replied it was Sister Benedicta, who used to say she was smart and could learn quickly, but she had left before teaching her everything. The revelation that Lily could read and write, even partially, completely, contradicted the idea that she was just an uneducated street child. There was something more complex to her story, something no one yet understood. Ethan asked where she had last seen Aunt Sarah, feeling he was on the verge of discovering important information. She said it was at the city hospital, where she worked cleaning the rooms, and that she always gave her food when there were leftovers from the kitchen. At that moment, Victoria appeared at the office door, wearing a silk robe and a worried expression, asking what was happening. Ethan explained that Lily was trying to write a letter, showing the paper to his wife, telling her that the girl knew how to read and write. The information caught Victoria completely off guard. She couldn't believe it, thinking Lily had never attended school. Lily timidly said she hadn't been to a real school, but Sister Benedicta had taught her things, saying she had to learn for when her parents came back. Victoria sat in a nearby armchair and asked if her parents were coming back. The girl's cryptic reply, that Aunt Sarah said maybe one day they would come for her when they were better, raised more questions than answers. Ethan decided it was time to find this Aunt Sarah and discover the truth about Lily's past. Later that morning, while Lily was playing with Caleb in the garden, a touching scene where she described every flower and insect in detail so he could see through her words, Ethan went out to the Oak Creek Community Hospital. Sarah Jenkins was finishing her overnight shift when he arrived. A thin, 35-year-old woman with evident signs of exhaustion, she became visibly nervous when Ethan introduced himself and explained the reason for his visit. She asked if Lily was with him, her hands trembling slightly as she put away her cleaning supplies. He confirmed that she had saved his son yesterday and was now temporarily at their house, and that he needed to better understand her situation. Sarah looked around nervously, as if afraid of being overheard, and told him she couldn't talk there, asking him to meet her at the church square in an hour. The meeting in the square revealed a much more complex story than Ethan had imagined. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, confessed that she wasn't really Lily's aunt. She had known her family, working as a cleaner in the house where they lived in a neighboring town. Lily's parents, she explained, had problems, serious problems. When Ethan asked what kind, she revealed they got sick, a food poisoning that affected their brains, leaving them different. They couldn't care for her properly anymore. Relatives wanted to put Lily in a terrible orphanage and keep the social benefits she received. Ethan's blood ran cold. He asked if she was the one who brought her here. She said she couldn't let that happen, that Lily was a special, intelligent child who deserved better. She brought her to Oak Creek because she thought that here, in a smaller town, it would be easier to find a good family to care for her. When asked why she lied about being her aunt, Sarah lowered her head, admitting that if anyone found out the truth, they would prosecute her for kidnapping. She only wanted to protect her. The revelation hit Ethan like a thunderbolt. Lily was not an orphan. She had living but incapacitated parents, and Sarah had risked everything to save her from an even worse situation. He asked where her parents were now. Sarah told him they were in a clinic in Atlanta, that Lily's aunt had managed to get them admitted but didn't want to keep the child, saying she couldn't afford it. When Ethan returned home, he found a scene that moved him deeply. Lily was sitting at the piano in the living room, playing a simple melody she had invented, while Caleb listened fascinated beside her. Caleb exclaimed that his dad was home and that Lily knew how to play the piano, saying she learned by listening to Sister Benedicta play at church. Lily modestly said it was just a silly little tune, but Ethan could hear genuine talent in the melody she had created. Victoria came from the kitchen with a disturbed expression, saying they needed to talk urgently. She pulled him into the office and closed the door. She had just received a call, and a social worker was coming that afternoon. Someone had reported that they were housing a street child. When he asked who would do such a thing, she said she didn't know, but they would question their suitability to care for Lily, explaining that the woman said it was protocol in cases of vulnerable children. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Rhonda Clark, a 60-year-old social worker, a severe woman with thick-framed glasses and a folder full of forms. She entered the house with an air of authority that immediately made everyone uncomfortable. She introduced herself as Rhonda Clark from the Department of Social Services and stated she had received information that they were sheltering a minor in an irregular situation. Ethan explained that Lily was there because she had saved their son, and they were just taking care of her temporarily. Rhonda said she understood their gratitude, but there were protocols to be followed. She questioned if they had experience with socially vulnerable children, if they knew the traumas these children carry. Victoria felt belittled by the question, stammering that they didn't, specifically. But Rhonda continued sternly that a street child is not a toy, that they need specialized care, not families who treat them like charity projects. Caleb, who had appeared in the room unnoticed, protested that Lily was not a charity project. She was his friend. Rhonda looked at the blind boy with a calculated expression and asked if he thought it was appropriate for a child with his limitations to become emotionally dependent on a minor at risk. The cruel question made Victoria stand up abruptly and ask how she dared to speak to her son that way. Mrs. Hayes, she said, was just doing her job, and the reality was that they were not prepared to handle a situation like this. It was then that Lily entered the room, carrying a drawing she had made. It was a portrait of the Hayes family. including herself, all holding hands in front of the house. At the top, she had written in neat letters, "My new family." The ensuing silence was tense and charged with emotion. Rhonda looked at the drawing and then at the girl, her expression softening slightly. She asked, "Dear, if Lily understood that this family couldn't keep her forever." The question made the girl's eyes fill with tears, but she nodded bravely, saying she knew that no one ever stays with her forever. The answer broke everyone's heart. Caleb moved closer to Lily and held her hand, even without being able to see her. He said with determination that he would stay, that he would always stay. Rhonda put away her papers with a thoughtful expression. She would need a few days to evaluate the situation. Lily could stay there temporarily, but she would return next week for a full inspection. After she left, the family stood in silence in the room. That's when the phone rang, and Ethan answered to a voice that made his blood run cold. It was Jack Santana, who said he needed to talk to him, urgently. The meeting with Jack Santana took place in a discreet cafe in downtown Oak Creek, far from the curious eyes of the town's residents. Ethan's ex-employee appeared visibly nervous, his hands trembling as he fidgeted with the sugar. For a coffee he hadn't even tasted. Jack began by saying he needed to tell him the truth about what happened, that he hadn't acted alone when he tied him up that day. Ethan's blood ran cold as he asked what he meant. It was Trevor Morris, Jack confessed. He had convinced him to do it, saying Ethan was going to fire him anyway, and he had nothing to lose. He promised to pay him $5,000 if he managed to scare him enough to accept some financial arrangements. Ethan was stunned. His accountant, Trevor, Jack revealed that Trevor had been embezzling money from the company for 2 years, and when he found out Ethan was getting suspicious, he panicked. The idea was to threaten him, so he wouldn't look too closely at the books. The revelation hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Trevor Morris had worked for him for 5 years, a trusted man with access to all the company's accounts. If he was really embezzling money, it would explain the recent financial problems that had nearly bankrupted the construction company. When asked if he had proof, Jack pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket containing copies of documents Trevor had shown him. Fake transfers, doctored invoices, everything. He thought Jack was too dumb to understand, but he had kept everything. Ethan examined the papers with growing horror. The embezzled amounts reached hundreds of thousands of dollars, money that was missing from the family budget, and explained why he had needed to cut expenses in recent months. He asked why he was being told this now. It was because he had heard that Ethan was taking care of that girl, Lily. Jack paused, his voice cracking. He had a daughter the same age, living with his ex-wife in another city. When he saw what happened, how that child saved his son, it made him think of his own daughter, what he would do if she were in Lily's situation. When asked what this had to do with Trevor, Jack revealed that Trevor knew he had brought the girl home, and yesterday he found out that Trevor had called social services. He was the one who made the complaint. Ethan clenched his fists, enraged that Trevor would stoop so low as to use an innocent child to harm him. Jack explained that Trevor was desperate and knew his days were numbered. His idea was to create as much chaos as possible in Ethan's personal life, so he wouldn't have the time or energy to investigate the company's finances. That afternoon, armed with the evidence provided by Jack, Ethan went directly to Trevor's office. The accountant, a thin 38-year-old man with a perpetually impeccable appearance, tried to maintain his composure when he saw Ethan walk in with the documents in hand. He feigned surprise, asking what he could do for him. Ethan threw the papers on the desk and told him to explain them. 2 years of embezzling money from his company, 2 years of robbing him while he trusted him. Trevor's face instantly turned pale, and he denied knowing what Ethan was talking about. Ethan added that he even had the nerve to report an innocent child to social services just to hurt him. Trevor retorted that the child shouldn't be in his house, that he didn't understand the risks. The only risk here, Ethan interrupted, was him. He was fired, and he would hand all this evidence to the police. Trevor stood up abruptly, his mask of composure finally shattering, pleading that he couldn't do this, that he had a family and children. Ethan told him he should have thought of that before he started stealing. Meanwhile, at home, an even more surprising discovery was unfolding. Sarah had come to visit Lily and brought with her a revelation that would change everything permanently. She knelt in front of the girl and said she needed to tell her something very important about her family. Victoria and Caleb were present, and both sensed the tension in the air. Her parents, Sarah began with difficulty, didn't get sick from eating spoiled food. They got sick because they were poisoned. Victoria was horrified, asking what she meant. It was a doctor at the hospital where she worked, Dr. Henry Clark. He was testing experimental drugs on poor patients without their knowledge. Lily's parents were some of the victims. The revelation left everyone in shock. Caleb, who had been listening intently, asked if this doctor was still at the hospital. Sarah confirmed he was, and worse, he was the brother of the hospital director, which was why the case was hushed up. When she discovered what he had done, she tried to report it, but no one believed her. It was a word against that of a respected doctor. Victoria wanted to know why she was telling them this now. Sarah looked at Lily with tears in her eyes, because Caleb had also been a patient of that doctor. The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb stood motionless, processing the information. He asked if his blindness was caused by this doctor. Sarah explained that he was born with a treatable condition, but Dr. Clark used an experimental drug on him when he was 3, during a simple surgery. The drug caused irreversible damage to his optic nerve. Victoria covered her mouth. With her hands, horrified, asking why they never knew, Sarah revealed that he falsified the medical reports, claiming it was a natural complication of the surgery. She was in charge of cleaning the surgical center back then and saw the vials of unapproved drugs. She knew something was wrong but was afraid to speak up. Lily approached Caleb and held his hand, asking if that meant they were both hurt by the same bad man. "It seemed so," Caleb replied, his voice filled with a new understanding. When Ethan arrived home that night and learned of the entire revelation, he made a decision that would change all their destinies. He said firmly that they would fight. They would expose this doctor, recover the money Trevor stole, and they would finalize Lily's adoption. Victoria asked if he was sure, knowing it would be a long and difficult battle. He was certain. This family had been through traumas caused by the same person. Lily saved Caleb, but in truth, they had saved each other. And now, they would save all of them. 3 months later, Dr. Henry Clark was under investigation by the State Medical Board. Trevor had been arrested, and the embezzled funds were gradually being recovered. With part of the recovered money, Ethan was able to finance an experimental treatment for Caleb in Atlanta, an innovative procedure that had the potential to partially restore his vision. Lily had been officially adopted by the Hayeses after an emotional hearing where she herself, with her simple but touching words, convinced the judge that she had found her true family. Sarah, who had shown exceptional courage by testifying against the doctor, was promoted at the hospital under new management and got a better job at Ethan's construction company, overseeing social responsibility projects. Lily's biological parents, though still with cognitive limitations, had improved significantly with proper treatment and could now receive visits from their daughter once a month, creating an emotional connection where she would sing them the songs Caleb had taught her on the piano. On the day Caleb had his first surgery for the experimental treatment, Lily held his hand in the hospital waiting room in Atlanta. He asked nervously what would happen if it didn't work. She replied that then he would continue to be her brother who sees with his heart, and she would continue to be his eyes 4. The beautiful things in the world. 6 months after that terrible day that had begun with screams of despair, the Hayes family gathered in their garden to celebrate Lily's 5th birthday. Caleb, who had partially regained his sight and could now distinguish shapes and colors, held a special gift he had made for her, a colorful drawing of a brave girl saving a boy, with the words, "My hero sister," written underneath. He said now he could see her for real, admiring his adopted sister's smiling face, and that she was even more beautiful than he had imagined. Lily smiled, hugging Caleb and looking around at the family she had chosen, and that had chosen her back. From the garden where it had all begun with terror and violence, now there was only the sound of children's laughter, the soft melody of the piano she played every afternoon, and the certainty that even in the most desperate situations, love and courage can transform entire lives and create miracles where there was once only pain. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.